Something that not a lot of people know about ADHD is the concept of time blindness. And I have time blindness and I hate it. It sucks. It makes everything much harder than it needs to be. Um Basically, if you don't know what time blindness is, imagine if every time you looked at the clock, it even if you thought that only a minute had passed, you look at the clock and actually 20 minutes have passed, and you didn't even realize that you'd been spending 20 minutes standing around. And imagine that like every time you go to work, you're late because you can't manage time very well. So every time you go to work, your boss gets mad at you for being late. And you try to explain to them every single time that you have this thing, but they don't believe you because they don't know what it is and they don't understand it. That's pretty much what it's like living with time blindness. There'll be days where I'll be like I'll be working on a project and like I'll be spent like 4 hours will go by and I didn't even realize it. Like it didn't even feel like 4 hours, but like it did. It happened, and it's really hard to explain to people because most people don't experience it, so they don't get it. But if you have ADHD or ADD, then you probably understand because it's very common with people with ADHD. I don't know what it's like for autism, but it's definitely there a lot with ADHD. I've had lots of experiences where I've gotten in trouble because I was late to things, and I've gotten a lot better at being on time, but it took a lot of hard work and a lot of stress to figure it out. Because I used to show up to things like hours late, and then I was only like an hour late, and then I was only 30 minutes late, and then I was only 10 minutes late, and now I'm usually only 5 minutes late to things. Most of the time now I'm pretty much on time, but if I'm late, I'm usually around 5 minutes late. But that comes from a lot of thought and effort put into trying to figure out what is wrong with my brain and why it won't manage time the way that normal people do. Um, Basically, what I figured out is I usually will leave at least 5 minutes earlier than the time that I'm supposed to leave. Um, so I'll be early to leaving. And also, I usually set my clocks 5 minutes earlier than the actual time. I don't know why, but for some reason this helps. It's just like I look at the clock and I'm like, oh, I still got time. But like it kind of helps me like stay on top of things. And those are pretty much the two strategies that have helped me the most. Is you know, being early to leaving on time, and also setting my clock earlier than the actual time. I'm not really sure why these things work, but they do. I think one of the most frustrating things with ADHD is when people always assume like the worst. I constantly have people assuming that I'm being lazy and doing stuff on purpose when I'm not. It's literally because my brain is wired differently than normal people, and I literally like have to work twice as hard to do things that are considered normal, like being on time. But a lot of people don't really buy that. A lot of people will just kind of write you off and just like be like, well, try harder. That's like one of the most frustrating things to hear as someone with ADHD is like, well, you're just not trying hard enough, and you need to work harder. Look, man, I'm trying. I hate, it's not like I want to be late to things. I don't want to be disappointing people, because I understand that, when I'm late to something, then that affects other people, because, like, I understand that, like, me being late means that other people have to wait for me before they can do the things they're supposed to do, and I understand that it makes other people's lives more stressful. I 100% understand that I'm making everybody's lives worse. But I just have this thing with my brain, and I really, really, really would rather not be late to things. I really don't want to be late to things. I really want to work hard because I want to show people that I am capable, because I am capable. But, these things just, like, they pile up, and then people start to just put you in a box because they start expecting you to be late to things, and they start expecting you to not be at your best, I guess. Even though you might be trying your best, other people might not see it as your best. So ADHD is kind of a struggle because, it's just, you're also constantly getting distracted, and I also feel like a lot of times my brain will kind of, like, screw me over a little bit, where, like, I'll think that I need to start getting ready at one time, and then that time comes by, and then I realize, oh wait, I'm supposed to be leaving right now. Like, I was supposed to get ready, like, way earlier. And I don't know why my brain does this, but it just does. Sometimes it's just like, oh, you're good, you got time. And then I'll realize, oh wait, I don't have time, and now I'm late. It's truly very frustrating to deal with that. And I sometimes feel insecure about it because I sometimes feel like I'm dumb, even though I'm not dumb, but I sometimes still feel like I'm dumb because I can't do the things that normal people, quote unquote, there is not really any normal, but what most people can do pretty easily. It takes a lot more work from me. See, what always happens is I'll have I'll start being late to something, not on purpose, but it just, like, I just struggle with being on time, right? And I tell someone, like, whoever it is, like my boss or someone, and at first they're like, oh yeah, I get it, everybody's late sometimes. They're very understanding at first. The second time, they're like, okay, well, it's fine, just try to be here on time. The third time, they're like, you need to be on time. And the fourth time, they're like, why are you not on time? And then the fifth time, they're like, you're going to be fired if you don't come on time. And, and it's like, they'll ask me, like, is there anything we can do to help you? And it's kind of like, oh, well, not really. I mean, it's kind of just a thing with my brain. It's hard for me to think of something that you can do to help me. And then they'll be like, well, why are you constantly late? And it's like, well, I tell them, every time I tell them, actually, that, I have time blindness, I have ADHD, it's a physical kind of struggle almost. I also, with ADHD, like, transitioning from one activity to another is really hard, and sometimes that can literally feel like a physical thing. Like, I feel physically locked in place when I am trying to transition into another activity. So yeah, so I'll tell them every time, like, this is my thing, this is why this happens. And at first they're like, yeah, I get it, but after a while they're like, stop making excuses. You've been saying the same thing every time. And it's like, well, maybe that's because it hasn't changed. Maybe that's because it's still the same problem. It doesn't happen overnight. I just like, this is something I've been struggling with my entire life. I'm still figuring it out. But people don't really buy that. And also, a lot of times, they don't really understand how far you've come because they only see that you're late, but they don't know that you used to be super late to things and now you're just late. They just see that you're late. And so, it can be kind of a constant fight against the clock. And it's come to a point where, like, even when I have days off from, like, school and stuff, and like, I don't have anything to do, I still find myself starting to panic, being like, oh crap, am I late to something? Even if I don't know what I'm late for, because I don't actually have anything scheduled, I'll still be like, oh crap, I probably have to be somewhere right now. And I'll start to panic until I realize, oh, I don't have anything. And even then, even when I do realize that I don't have anything, I still have this kind of looming threat of being late to things. It's just something that's just like, it's such a it's such a Pavlovian response. Like, it just becomes so drilled into me that it'll just be sudden panic, when I'm like, wait, there's something going on. I have to be somewhere right now. So yeah, it's like almost like a phantom being late to something. One of the worst things that I've had people say to me, it's like really obnoxious when like people who are older than me who have ADHD or something, and they're like, yeah, I get it, I have ADHD too, but I figured it out, so that means you need to be perfect now. And it's like, well, you had your whole life to figure that out. Like, you're like 10 years older than me, boss person, I guess. Like, it's like, you're way older than I am. Like, I'm only 20. I'm still figuring stuff out. Like, you've had your whole life to figure that out. I don't know. It just gets really irritating when people are like, well, I can do blah blah blah, so you have to do blah blah blah. You have to be able to do that, this or that, because I can do it. So you have to know immediately how to do that. And it's like, look, man, it's like, I'm figuring it out, you know? Sometimes people get frustrated with me because they try to, like, give me advice and, like, try to give me, like, ways to cope with my ADHD. But, sometimes it just doesn't always work for my brain. But then people get frustrated because they're like, well, I gave you all these things and you're not taking any of them. You're just saying you can't do them. And it's like, well, I don't know. I mean, I tried it before and it didn't work. It's just not how my brain works. I mean, that might work for you, but that doesn't mean that it automatically works for me. I don't, like, our brains are different, Even among other people with ADHD, our brains are still super different. And not everything that works for one person with ADHD works for another person with ADHD. I remember distinctly as a kid, I remember, like, being in elementary school, and I remember, like, I knew that I was different than the other kids, and the other kids definitely knew that I was different. But I remember, like, never being able to, like, articulate it. I remember never being able to fully explain to the adults around me, like, why I was struggling. And, sometimes it would lead to, like, adults, like teachers, and, just adults in general, always kind of, like, yelling at me and being like, try harder. And I'm like, I am trying. It's just like, I just can't fully explain to you why it's not working for me. And when you're a kid, you don't understand that it's your brain that's just wired different. So you kind of just say to yourself, well, there's just something, I don't know what's wrong with me, basically, is what you say to yourself and to, your parents and to the adults around you. Because, like, you know that you're smart and you know that you are capable. And you know that you're just as smart as the other kids around you, but then at the same time, the other kids around you are getting things, like they're understanding things really easily, like things that you don't, like, that you have a hard time figuring out, and you don't know why you can't figure it out. You just know that you can't figure it out, and the other kids around you are figuring it out way faster than you, and also their grades are better. And it almost feels like other kids just don't even have to try to get their grades, like, really good. It feels like other people just, like, have the magic touch, and every homework assignment they touch is perfect, and all the grades they touch are just perfect grades. And I never understood how people did that. I always felt like I was super behind, and I really struggled. Like, whenever one grade would go down, another one would go down. Or whenever I get one grade up, I mean. Whenever I get one grade back to where it should be, like, another grade would just sink to the bottom. And I didn't know why that happened. It was probably because I was focusing so much on one grade that I just didn't have the space in my head to focus on the other grades. So while I was focusing on one grade, everything else would kind of fall behind. And this was just like a constant struggle in school for me, like all throughout my school career. Not as much now that I'm in college, because I get to choose how many classes I take. So I'm only taking 2 classes right now, which is really nice. I mean, I'd like to get a degree faster, but I just can't handle more than 2 classes. I don't know how I did it in high school, like when I had like 12 classes or 8 classes or something. Like, I don't know how I juggled all that, and I don't know how I possibly passed all my grades, because I did end up passing. I did graduate from high school. I don't understand how it happened, because I struggle with just 2 classes right now, let alone 8 or 12. I think it was probably 8, because I think there was 4 classes every day. And they were 2 separate, like, they were A days and B days, so I had 4 separate classes every other day. But yeah, I never understood how other kids could just so easily get straight A's and like just fly through school. Because I felt like it almost looked effortless, like they were just gliding. It felt like I was rolling a boulder up a hill, and everybody else was just gliding on ice. And it kind of sucked, because the school district that I was in, like, the school that I went to, I mean, it was a good quote-unquote school in the way that they graduate a lot of freaking honors students and stuff, and every single year they have students who get scholarships and stuff. But I'm really frustrated with that school that I went to, because while they were focusing so much on the honor kids and the Sterling Scholar students, I felt like I was being left behind. And I felt like a lot of other students who were like me were also feeling left behind, because they just wouldn't accommodate for anybody who wasn't like a straight A, super great student. It just felt like they didn't give any of the help, and it was, instead of being like, oh, how can we help you understand this, felt more like an attitude of like, why don't you understand this? Man, I just had so many crappy teachers in high school, like so many teachers. My mom actually had to defend me from so many like really terrible teachers. Like throughout my whole school career, not even just high school, but like in middle school and even elementary school, I just had I just had so many bad teachers. I only ever had like two teachers that I really loved. And those were particularly good teachers because they freaking believed in me and thought that I could do a good job. Dude, I had so many teachers who just like yelled at me every single day because I didn't understand something. And specifically two math teachers I really hated. There were these two math teachers that I had, one when I was in 10th grade and one when I was in 11th grade. The 10th grade teacher was just the most unhelpful teacher ever. She would always say this obnoxious thing where she'd be like, well, because I'd go up to her and be like, Mrs. Teacher, I don't understand this, can you help me? And she'd be like, did you ask your neighbor? I'm like, no, I didn't ask my neighbor, they don't understand it either. And they're like, well, did you check your notes? I'm like, I don't know, you blitzed through the whole lesson so freaking fast that I didn't write any notes down. And they're like, well, go figure it out. And it's like, wow, thanks. You're being so helpful. Like, it's your job to help me, but you're not. Yeah, I got really frustrated with that teacher because she never helped anybody. Like, she never helped me. She never helped any of the other students. Actually, she did help all the students that were doing really well, but she never helped students that were struggling, like me. At least that's what I remember. I might be remembering that wrong, but yeah, the other teacher that I had, she just like, she would just yell at me and give me a hard time, like constantly, like every single day. I dreaded going to that class. Because I didn't want to get yelled at, you know, but like every day I'd go into that class, and you know, and I mean, to be fair, you know, I was a surly teenager, so you know, I wasn't like the greatest student to teach at the time, but you know, I was 16, you know, so I don't know, like most teenagers are like that, but. You know, like I remember this teacher, for some reason I had her sign my yearbook because I was like, you made me suffer so much, I have to have you sign my yearbook for whatever reason. And in my yearbook, she wrote, I know I gave you a hard time, but blah, 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 I don't remember what she said. And I wanted to be like, man, fuck you, you know? I mean, sorry for swearing, you know, I guess. I mean, I've sworn before on this channel, so whatever, but, you know, it's just like, man, like, shut up. Like, you knew that you were being an asshole to me the whole time, and, like, making my life harder, and you just didn't care? Like, alright. Thanks, I guess. She didn't even apologize. She was just like, yeah, I know I gave you shit. And I was like, well, alright then. Thanks. So yeah. So, you know, I just had a lot of crappy teachers. I also, when I was in 7th grade, I had this geography teacher named Mr. Stampley. And he was like the worst teacher ever. My mom actually said to me that she thought that he was bipolar. Because there were some days where he would just be yelling at us. And then there were other days when he would just be talking about the most random things. Like, there was one time he was talking about bologna and chocolate bars. Like literally, I remember that so distinctly. He was talking about bologna and chocolate bars. See, the thing was, like, I hated this teacher, because he was actually really funny. Which made it more infuriating, somehow, because, like, it was like, I hate you, but you're making me laugh, so it's, like, this contradictory thing, but, like, when he would yell at us, like, it was like he just hated children, like, I don't know what his deal was, but he just freaking hated kids, and he always, like, he would just yell at everybody all the time and give everybody crap. And it was just like, and when you're like 13, it's like, I don't know, like, you can't stand up to those kind of people, like, because they're bigger than you, and you don't know what to do in that situation. So I actually had a teacher that I really liked. She was my special ed teacher, and she actually had to defend me a few times. I remember so distinctly because I had her class right after that geography class, and I remember that I would like go to her class and I was just crying, and she talked to me about it, and she was really nice to me. And then she like went and talked to Mr. Stampley and told him to stop yelling at me. And I don't know exactly what she said, but I know that she went and talked to him a few times because he made me cry several times. He was just that terrible. And I think because we moved, I lived in Michigan for a while when I was a kid, but we moved back to my home state, and I remember, like, I heard from some of my friends from Michigan. I heard from some of my friends that this teacher, like, after I left, he like flipped a desk at a kid or something, and I was like, that, I'm not surprised. That checks out, because he would like freaking he was like, it's so hard to explain to people how awful this teacher was. He was super like sadistic, and just like, it was as if he took pleasure out of making the lives of children miserable. So yeah, and he had a really bad temper. I think he was just something was not right with him in the head. But yeah, I think he got fired after that, which, like, good riddance. My mom told me that she wanted to complain to the school about that teacher, but since we moved, it was like, well, we're not in that school district anymore, so whatever. But yeah, Mr. Stampley, me and my friends used to call him, we used to call him Snape. We used to call him Professor Snape in code, so that we could talk about him when he was around. And I guess, he probably could tell we were talking about him, but in our 13-year-old minds, we were being super coy and sneaky. But yeah, and I've been on a tangent for a while, but, this all just kind of plays back into the ADHD of, like, I always struggled in school, and I always felt like I couldn't articulate why. And a lot of people, I felt like a lot of people were just, like, automatically good at school somehow. And I also felt like a lot of teachers didn't understand why I was bad at school, even though I was on ADHD meds. Like they knew I had an IEP. Like, they knew that I struggled with school, but they just didn't care, I guess. Like, they would still yell at me all the time. And now I have such a, like, rejection sensitivity because I got yelled at so much as a kid. I mean, not so much, like, by my parents, but just by, like, teachers and, like, other students, I think, maybe, and, like, just adults around me just always were getting mad at me. And I remember just being, like, this helpless kid. Like, I remember just feeling super helpless, and, like, I couldn't stand up for myself. And now it's just, like, such a like, automatic response where, like, whenever somebody has any indication of being mad at me, even if they're not mad at me, I revert back, and I go straight back to being that little 10-year-old boy, and just feeling like this hot wash of shame and embarrassment, and, like, feeling like, just, like, having to look down and kind of get smaller and hunch my shoulders, and, it's just such a built-in response at this point, where, like, I remember my dad recently, when I was living with my parents, he was like, come upstairs for a second, and when I came upstairs, I was like, what did I do? And my dad was like, "Why do you always assume that I'm mad, like that you did something wrong when I call for you?" I'm like, "Look, man, I'm so like growing up like with people always being like whenever someone said I need to talk to you, it was always I was about to get yelled at, you know." So yeah, those are some of my experiences with ADHD and all that. I was going to just talk about time blindness specifically, but I just ended up talking about ADHD in general because I just have a lot of experiences with ADHD ruining my life sometimes. And I mean, I'm exaggerating, but that's how it felt like when I was a kid. But yeah, if anybody else understands what I'm talking about and you've ever been through similar experiences, let me know in the comments because I would love to hear your stories. But with that, I'm going to sign out because I ran out of things to talk about, and I also have to go somewhere now. But yeah, stay cool and attractive, I guess.